So this is a brief introduction into ZBrush for medical illustration. When you first open ZBrush, you get this kind of splash screen homepage, which you can just close out of, and then it will automatically open this light box, which is just pre-built resources within the software that you can use. Usually I'll just click on the cube or the sphere or something basic to get started with, and it will change my workspace to fill my screen. And you can see my object here in the middle. If you click anywhere in the space outside of the object, you can see that you can rotate it around. If you hold Alt while you click, then you can, if you hold Alt first and then click, then you can move it around. And if you let go of Alt while you're moving it around, then you switch into zoom. So those are all available over here in the side panel. So if you click move here, you can drag it around. You can similarly zoom in and out, and then you can rotate it as well. And so these I tend to use if I'm zoomed in really far here and I need to move around or rotate, because I don't have the empty space that I need to be able to click on to do it out here. If you hold shift, it will snap it to orthogonal views, which is very helpful if you need to organize how you're going about things. If you want to add more objects to your scene in ZBrush, those are called subtools. So you come up here to your subtool menu and you click on it and it will open up that menu. And say I want to add another object here, maybe a cube. So I'm going to click on cube, and you can see that it's created a cube in my scene, but that cube has engulfed this sphere. If I want to move this object, I come up here and click move, and it will give me my gizmo here, which I can move over. And you can see that I'm selected on my sphere here, so I'm going to hit Control Z to bring that back, and now I'm going to click on my cube, which will highlight, and then I can bring that over like this. So now that I've got these two objects here, if I need to merge them, I can come up here and I can click on the object that I want to merge, and I can come down here to my merge menu, and I'm going to click merge down. Okay, and so I'm going to click always OK. So now that these are merged, they're not one object, but I can edit them together. So I'm going to come over here to draw, and that will allow me to use my brush. And if I click on that, you can see I've got all these options for different brushes that I can use to manipulate this mesh. And now I can sculpt on these together as one object. But there's still two objects. So if I come down here to split, I can click split to parts. I'm going to click always OK again. And now you can see that I've got my two separate objects here again that I can work on independently. And so you might have a situation where you need to merge them and you want them to stay as one object and not be able to be separated out because you're just trying to make something more complex. So I'm going to merge these back together. And now what I'm going to come down here to do is I'm going to come down here to my geometry menu. So I held shift when I clicked that menu just so I can keep my subtool menu open as well. Otherwise, if I just click one without holding shift, it will collapse my other menus. Okay, so I want both my subtool and geometry menu open. So I'm going to hold shift when I click them. And so I'm going to come down here to Dynamesh. And so what Dynamesh does is it creates an even topology across the surface of your models while joining any area where they meet. If I wanted to remesh them, but I didn't want to join them, then I could do ZRemesher. And ZRemesher is a little bit different. It doesn't just create a homogeneous mesh across the surface. It actually looks at the shape and contours of the object and makes a more intelligent mesh. So there's reasons that you want to do that when you're trying to reduce your geometry count. Right now we have 11,000 points active. So I'm going to click on Dynamesh here. And when I click on that, you can see that now these are merged up. So if I hold shift to smooth, so you can see it changes when I hold shift to smooth up here. Now this is truly one object. This cannot be separated back out anymore. If I click on my polygons, you can see that these are seamless, and there are two poly groups though, which is why they're different colors. So I suppose I could split the poly groups if I really wanted to, or I could work on them independently. But you'll notice if I come up here to split, if I click split to parts, it's not composed of multiple parts. Okay, so if I so this is an undoable operation. These cannot be taken apart. And now you'll notice if I click Dynamesh here, I can create higher or lower resolution meshes. If I hit ZRemesher, it's going to look at these edges and it's actually going to give me topology to match those edges. So I'm just going to click ZRemesher here, and it should substantially reduce my polygon count. You can see it went from like 29,000 up there to 13,000. And so that's a nice way to clean up your model and make a much nicer mesh. So now that I've got this object, say I want to put a hole through it for some reason. Well, the easiest way to do that is to use what's called the Boolean function. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an object the shape of the hole I want to remove. So I'm going to go, I'm just going to add on, say, a cylinder here. And now I'm going to click on that cylinder, and I'll come up here to my gizmo, and I'm going to click the move tool, and I'm just going to rotate this maybe at some weird orientation like this. I'm going to scale it out here, and I'm just going to create a hole right through the middle of this thing. And so what I want to do is I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to say I want to start my action with this object, and then I'm going to say this object should be subtracted from the front. And it's not actually going to show me that subtraction unless I come up here to click Live Boolean. And now you can see that I have created this subtraction through here. This isn't actually subtracted yet though, because I haven't told it to execute on that. And you can see that the resolution of the hole is going to be the resolution of this object. So I'm just going to come down here and I'm going to divide that geometry a couple times to make it a nice smooth hole. All right, and so now what I have to come down here is to my little Boolean menu, in my subtool menu, and I'm going to click Make Boolean Mesh. And so what we're going to have to do is it's going to populate that up here. So I have to actually come up here to find that. And now here's my new object. And now I can continue working on this object. Or say if I wanted to bring it into this scene, I could come down to my Append menu, and I could actually add it here. And then I would have to turn off these two. I would hide them, and now I've got this in this scene. So that's nice if you need to come back to these, or say I want to like make this object, as part of this. And so let's just, let's see here. So now say I want to make this like just slightly smaller than that hole for whatever reason. Now you can see that I've got that object within a perfectly shaped hole that matches its contour. All right, so those are just some helpful tips to get you started in the basic functions of ZBrush. So let me just scrap this, and let's come up here, and I'm just going to reopen a sphere. Just get rid of all that. And say I want to make a vertebra or something. And one thing I'm going to do here is actually I'm going to have it turn the floor on, so it just gives me a little bit easier way to show my orientation. And there are other things you can do too if you want to change the document, back color or something like that. Oops, let me click that here. You can change it to white or whatever your foreground color is. So that's a little bit distracting. So usually I do kind of like the default. Let me just change that back. Oops. And you can see that it's changing the color of my object as well. So, if you want your object to be different colors and you want it to maintain that color, you can just come up here to Color Fill Object. Okay, so maybe I'm going to make a bone here. So let's make this kind of like a bone color, kind of a light orange. Yeah, there we go. Fill object, and there are different materials you could apply to this as well. I don't use this for rendering, so I don't mess with the materials typically, but there are different things you can make this more reflective, or you could play with whatever material you want. So let's say we want to make a vertebra or something. So I'm going to kind of just make this roughly a little bit flatter here, and maybe this would be easier to work from a cylinder, so then it's kind of more like end plates. So let me just delete that object. And say, okay, here. So I'm going to make, this will be my vertebral body. And now I'm going to come up here to draw, and I'm going to come to my snake hook tool. So I'm going to actually hit S. So it'll just show me tools that start with S. And then this is the tool I want. And you can see I have that shortcut number 4 there. So skip note until next restart. Okay. So, and I'm just going to come down here to my geometry, and I'm just going to divide it a little bit. You're always supposed to work from the lowest geometry topology possible, but I will usually just remesh it later and clean it up. So my workflow is a little bit different. So so let's say this is going to be the front of my vertebra, and I actually want to turn symmetry on, so I can make this perfectly symmetrical. So it's going to have symmetry on the x-axis only, so anything I do on one side will be reflected on the other. So say I want the pedicles to come out here, so I can pull the pedicles out here. You can see that it's mirroring that on the other side. So let's just say this is the back of the vertebral body. So let's just kind of pull out some pedicles here, and you can see that I'm stretching these polygons pretty significantly. And so I'm going to come into a situation where I don't have much detail left to work with. So I could always remesh it. That's one thing I could do, is just keep remeshing it to get more polygons. But the other thing I can do is come up here to Sculptress, and then as I pull out geometry, you can see that it'll actually create new polygons, and it will do it proportioned to whatever size my brush is. So if I change my brush size to a bit smaller, it's going to make smaller polygons, as you can see. So I'm going to just work with a bit bigger brush for right now. And so let's say, these are my pedicles. Let's make the superior articular process. Let's come down here to the pars, and then let's bring out an inferior articular process. And you can see that this is getting pretty thin. So I'm just going to switch to my inflate brush. So I'm going to hit I, and then come over here to inflate, and I'm just going to add a little bulk a little bulk to this, so I have some more polygons to work with and stuff to sculpt on. Okay, and now I'm just going to switch back to my snake hook brush. I'm going to hit 4 because I already have that as a shortcut. And I'm just going to come back here and make my lamina. All right, and you can see I'm getting the midline here. Now let's make the spinous process. And now you can see that, these are two separate objects, and so that's not very good, okay, because I don't want to give them a spina bifida occulta. So, so what I'm going to do, oops, I've got this. Yeah, there we go. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to dynamesh it. And the dynamesh should close that gap, hopefully, if my resolution of the mesh is above the level of the size of that gap. So if I'm going to come over here to dynamesh, I'm just going to click dynamesh, and you can see that it actually did fuse it, but not completely. So I'm just going to lower the resolution so that the size of the polygons it's making are bigger than that hole. All right, so there we go. Now it's totally merged up. And now I'm just going to divide that mesh again. I'm going to delete that lower division. And now we can go through and I can just keep sculpting on this to refine the shape, to get it as close to being, what I want it to be as possible, because, the anatomy here isn't perfect. And so it's going to take a little bit of finessing, and those are like the longest pedicles of all time. So, a lot of work to do here. Maybe let me just select all this. I'm holding Control to select this. And then I'm just going to move this whole thing back here to shorten that up. All right. That's a bit better. So I'm going to hold Control and just click on the empty space to unselect that. I'm just going to dynamesh that one more time just to fix all that stuff. And now I'm going to come back here to draw. I'm going to hold Shift to smooth, and I'm just going to smooth all this back out. And now you can see I've fixed my super ridiculously long pedicles. So so you can see there's ways to fix stuff if you have any problems, and it's pretty quick to just go about moving this and creating it the way you want it to. So ultimately we could get this to it looking like a pretty realistic anatomic shape. And so you can render this and create pictures from this that are really nice with ZBrush if you wanted to. You just hit BPR, Best Preview Render, and if you come up here to your render menu, and I'm just going to click this little docking icon, you can mess with the shadows if you wanted to soften up the shadows, you want to blur them a bit, and that type of stuff, so that you can create a little bit more soft model. I don't render in ZBrush anymore. I did for years. I purchased the Keyshot, which is what a lot of people use with this. So I'm just going to go here to External Renderer, because then I can get more sophisticated materials and lighting that are photo accurate. So now when I hit Best Preview Render, what it's going to do is it's actually going to open up Keyshot and populate my model in there. So it's going to take a minute because it's just booting up. Okay, so now my model's in here. And I can go up to my materials menu. No, I don't know why this is taking a minute to load. Just give it a second. And I'm going to come up to, in my materials, I have already built like a bone looking material. And you can see that I can change my my environment to the lighting to be kind of however I want. So that's how I go about rendering, and I like to work in this for rendering. All right, so that's just want to give you a quick introduction into the basic functions of ZBrush. Of course, there's a lot more that we didn't cover. We're only scratching the surface here, but just wanted to share that in case you think it might be helpful in helping you create diagrams.